So here we have our presentation on survey research. What is survey research exactly? Survey research is defined as a collection of information from a sample of individuals through their responses to questions. Basically, it's how people respond to questions that you've created for them. It is the most popular research method used in social sciences and overall in society. There are three main survey methods used in survey research, and those are online or email surveying, telephone, or face to face. Survey research can be longitudinal, meaning it goes on for years and years and even decades, or it's cross sectional. It wants insights from a target audience at a particular time interval. For example, mothers after the birth of their first child, whereas something longitudinal might be uh, questioning a particular group of people on their birthday for 10 years or every June 1st for 10 years. What is the purpose of survey research? Primary purpose is to obtain information which give characteristics to a large group of individuals in a relatively quick time period. This data from these surveys is statistically analyzed to draw some meaningful research conclusions. This is based on the surveying method. It can be a short paper or pencil feedback or a couple questionnaire, just check off yes, no, to an intensive one-on-one, in-depth, prolonged interview. Uh, Types of data that survey research can generate and what's used. You have quantitative research using a questionnaire or uh, a poll. How many people support this? How many people support that? Or qualitative research using a focus group, one-on-one interviews, or an open-ended question. Going back to the example with the mothers at the birth of their first child, you could say, how did you feel before the baby was born? Or what were your thoughts in the delivery room, for example? And then there's a mixed method, which is just a combination of both strategies together. How do you exactly conduct survey research? Well, first you need to find out which population you want to study and then create a sampling plan. Then you need to determine what your survey question is going to be, because the survey question is going to ideally pull out what you hope to learn or what you want to know from that population. Then you do literature review to see if there's existing measures or methods for doing a survey study on that population. And then you determine the best way or mode to ask these survey questions. What would they most likely respond to in the greatest number? Would it be mail, through the internet, online, or in person? And depending on the number of individuals in the study, what's most realistic to reach these people? Are you going to interview in depth 200 people? Probably not. You're more likely to send out a questionnaire to them and sift through the feedback they give you. If you can, do an early pretest of the survey just to see where you're actually ending up. If you're right on, or maybe you're missing the mark and your methods are not giving you quite what you had hoped, if you're able to, you can tighten that up before you go live with your survey. And then, of course, next step, you execute your survey. And then once it's done, you analyze all of your results. And just references for the first part of the presentation. And we have second part. So we have here an example of survey method study, and this is a study here at the bottom. Challenges faced by psychiatric nurses managing psychiatric patients in a particular region of Nigeria, Kano State. So what happened in this study was They wanted to figure out what are the challenges for psychiatric nurses in the northwestern region of Nigeria. They reached out and polled 81 psychiatric nurses, that's their sample size, and they collected information using a self-questionnaire, meaning it's a questionnaire they gave to each of the 81 nurses and they filled it out themselves. The results showing that challenges for psychiatric nurses included limited resources, inadequate funding, neglect, poor staffing, um, difficulty obtaining enough quantities of medication. And these same nurses, when they listed their challenges, they also offered up suggestions for solutions or remedies to these challenges, which included make the facilities better, recruit more staff members, increase medications needed, and increase staff support, and obtain more government funding. Essentially, the research method was done by utilizing this questionnaire that they had created and administering it to the nurses. So that was how they were going to gather their data from that group of people, those psychiatric nurses. And once they were gathering data from a particular group of people with their questions, that was survey research. They were surveying this particular population's feelings on the matter of how their unit was staffed and what challenges they faced in their day-to-day work. The challenges to using a survey method range from the attitude of the participants. So, everyone's human. You may have someone who's having a bad day, doesn't feel like answering or being as present in responding to the survey. They may just put limited, brief, one-word, one-sentence answers when you're hoping for a little bit more than that. Or they just might not feel like doing it, but they just said yes anyways. So you have to consider that when you're reviewing your data. Context of the questions. If it's too open-ended, you might get rambling responses that don't really give you what you're looking for. But you also want to give the participants a chance, depending on what your end goal is, to express themselves. So that's where it can become tricky. You really want to fine-tune the exact question that you're asking by working backwards, asking yourself, what information do we want? And then how do we design a question to get that information? Finances, of course, any research. How many people can you reach with your study? How far is it going to be distributed? In the previous study, it was just one area of Nigeria. Do you want it, across multiple locations? Do you want it in multiple countries? Do you want it over multiple years? Do you want it on a large scale? That'll all depend on your financial resources, because that's always an issue, and you have to decide where to allocate those resources. And then what kind of instrument are you going to use? As we said before, depending on your population, a certain medium of surveying is best, but you have to determine what that is. And then also who your audience is, because a certain type of population might lend themselves to answering more written or mail-in questions, while others are more tech savvy, they want to be online, or others aren't going to give you the information you want unless you do an in-person interview. Limitations of survey research method. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that there. Participants can lie. They can give false answers. People have egos. They may just answer something not entirely truthfully to protect themselves, or because they're ashamed or embarrassed about their answer. You can't always be 100% certain that everyone's going to be truthful in responding. In addition, people might just not answer a question because they don't know what it's asking. They don't have the time or the patience to answer it. The question might be too long to read, and they just skip over it and say, I don't have time to read this, or it's too much for me. And questions are always subjective. You could have different people reading the same question, and they would get a different interpretation about what it's asking. Open-ended questions, again, are difficult because you can get run-on answers that don't really hit the mark of what you're looking for. Comprehension, again, is the person able to understand what you're asking, or are different people having different interpretations of your question. And then false findings, meaning survey questions or survey research methods, usually have false findings in that they can be difficult to reproduce given the nature of their subjective responses. You may gain something from one study, but then you try and repeat it and you get entirely different data or results. And that's about it. These are just the references. I hope that helped you understand a bit more about survey research. And we want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Thanks.